Estrangement is talked about like it's rejection, punishment, or a trend, but from where I stand, that's not what it is at all. For many of us, distance wasn't planned. It happened naturally when our minds started becoming healthy enough to recognize what no longer felt right. Estrangement is often explained from the outside looking in. People ask, why are adult children cutting parents off? Why are families drifting apart? Why does healing seem to lead people away from family? But those questions usually miss the deeper question. What changed inside the person creating the distance? Because for many people, distance is not revenge. It is not cruelty. It is not something they woke up one day and decided to do for fun. Sometimes distance happens because a healthy mind can no longer force itself to stay connected in ways that feel deeply unnatural. That is why so many people who step away are called cycle breakers, not because they hate their family, not because they are perfect, but because they are the ones who finally recognizing that some patterns should not be continued. And that matters because unhealthy dynamics do not always look the way people expect. A lot of people hear words like abuse, trauma, complex PTSD, emotional neglect, and they immediately attach those words to the most extreme version they can imagine. They think of screaming every day. They think of terrifying violence. They think of something obvious and undeniable. But unhealthy conditioning can be much quieter than that. It can be growing up in a home where conflict never gets resolved in a healthy way, where fear is normal, where doors slam, voices rise, people storm off, tensions fill the room, and then everyone pretends nothing happened. It can be being told not to talk about things, not to question things, not to make people feel uncomfortable, not to bring up truth into the room if truth threatens the family image. That kind of environment rewires a child too, not always in one giant moment, but layer by layer, pattern by pattern, like a rubber band ball that keeps growing over time. And once enough layers build up, your entire way of thinking, coping, relating, and surviving can become built around unhealthy patterns. Then one day something shifts. Sometimes it is a relationship with a safe person. Sometimes it's time alone. Sometimes it is work, school, marriage, faith, therapy, or simply enough distance from the old environment to finally see clearly. And when that happens, you start to notice what you once thought was normal was actually unhealthy. That is where the conflict begins. Because now there is a pull between who you were deep down and who you had to become to survive. That is why healing is so misunderstood. Healing is not about collecting labels and asking the world to tiptoe around you. Healing is not about weaponizing language. Healing is not about proving who is the villain. Real healing is about learning to tell the truth. It is about recognizing unhealthy patterns without turning them into your whole identity. It is about self reflection. It is about accountability. And it is about being willing to hear things without turning every truth into a fight. In a healthy relationship, truth does not have to become war. A healthy minded person can hear something uncomfortable and think, maybe I do need to reflect on that. Maybe there is something there that I did not see before. That does not mean every accusation is true, but it does not mean every memory is complete. But it does mean that healthy people are capable of pausing, reflecting, and communicating. Unhealthy dynamics usually do the opposite. They react, defend, dismiss, distort, debunk the person instead of looking at the pattern. And that is why I do not believe there are simply two stories. I think there are two truths. Your truth about what you lived, their truth about how they saw it. And healing is not pretending only one exists. Healing is being honest enough to bring both into the light and examine what actually happened. But many families never get there because one side is often still trying to protect the old dynamic while the other side has started growing beyond it. And once your mind becomes healthier, you cannot easily return to what once felt normal. That is the part many people do not understand. Healing does not lead you back to the way things were. It leads you forward. You do not heal just to re-enter the same conversations, the same silence, The same pretending, the same emotional pressure, the same patterns that once kept you disconnected from yourself. You heal so that you can live in truth. And sometimes that means relationships must change. Sometimes they become healthier. Sometimes they become more distant. Sometimes they end for a season, and sometimes they stay limited. Not because love disappeared, but because health changed what is possible. That is what I wish more people understood about estrangement. Distance is not always punishment. Sometimes it is what naturally happens when a person stops betraying themselves. Estrangement makes a lot more sense when you stop asking, "Why are you doing this to me?" and start asking, "What changed inside them that made the old dynamic impossible to return to?" That is where the real conversations begin.